2, 1.
It is an honor to be with you tonight. We've got an outstanding show. First, I want to go right now to Just the News White House correspondent Carrie Sheffield. She's got coverage of the Amistad Project's press conference this afternoon. It featured 3 whistleblowers detailing allegations of what they say is significant voter fraud in several key battleground states. Take a listen here.
Hey there, Eric. Yes, I'm here in Arlington where we just heard a press conference here. You can see the setup from the Amistad Project, which is with the Thomas More Society. And they had some witnesses on stage who were alleging that potentially hundreds of thousands of ballots were affected, possibly fraudulently. They alleged there was a truck driver who worked in Pennsylvania who was alleging that there were ballots that apparently originated in the state of New York and were carried across state lines illegally to then presumably be counted in the state of Pennsylvania when they should not have been counted if they were from another state. There was also a witness who was from Wisconsin who said up to 100,000 ballots were allegedly backdated, that they had been received. This was a subcontractor for the United States Postal Service in Wisconsin who alleged that up to 100,000 ballots were backdated that had been received on November 4th but were backdated to November 3rd in order to make the deadline for Election Day. And running this whole project here is Phil Klein. He joins me now. Phil, what was the biggest takeaway that you want people to get from this event?
Well, that there is substantial evidence of fraud, and the fraud and the evidence is massive. These are eyewitnesses. One of them actually transported the ballots, and the way that the ballots were received in Pennsylvania indicates that there were those who did not want others to know that completed ballots ready for counting moved from New York to Pennsylvania. Hundreds of thousands.
And when you say ready to be counted, they were removed from an envelope? There was no seal, or was there no?
They were all stacked up in bulk mail trays vertically so that it would be easy to carry them into the counting center. And then, in fact, you have eyewitness testimony and photographs of those very same types of trays being inserted into the counting stream in Delaware County on November 5th. So this evidence deserves extensive investigation. Moreover, our witness that spoke about transporting these ballots was corroborated by somebody who actually is up at that postal facility who said this happened multiple times. So you have hundreds of thousands. He carried in one load between 130 to 280,000 ballots into Pennsylvania, and this happened multiple times. It's deeply concerning.
And why is it, just to let our viewers know, why would it be concerning if they would have originated in New York State? Are you saying that these are ballots that were fabricated or originated from voters in New York and were counted in Pennsylvania?
No, if you consider how the ballots would flow through the mail, the legitimate ballot a person would cast and then they would drop it in a mailbox or whatever, and it would never find its way from one state 2 states away. Now, there are some areas where the central processing center along the borders might move it across the state line and back. But we're talking over 200 miles, from New York down to Pennsylvania. And not only that, this postal facility does not receive mail. Where he picked up this load, they have no equipment to process mail. They're not supposed to have this type of mail, and our experts say that's how you insert mail fraudulently into the stream, is you pick a facility like this. And they told us that before we told them this story, and they said, my gosh, that's exactly how you do it. This mail should have never been in New York at that facility, and no ballot should travel from New York to Pennsylvania to be counted, much less hundreds of thousands of them.
So what is your assessment then on how this actually happened? Where did these ballots come from? Are they from actual Pennsylvania voters, or are they from New York voters? I mean, what is your sense on these ballots? And because we're talking upwards of 288,000 ballots, at least in this one truck driver's story, and you said there have been other stories with other truck drivers as well. But in terms of manufacturing cold hundreds of thousands of ballots without detection, how would that have been even possible?
It's not that difficult. In fact, The ballot design and so forth is in the hands of a lot of private parties. But you have a good question, and the way we answer that question is to get the ballots. You know, I could speculate with you all day. I don't believe that there's any valid reason for a Pennsylvania voter to have, much less hundreds of thousands of their ballots, go up to New York to a postal facility that doesn't process mail to be shipped back to Pennsylvania. So that leads us to the question, how could and why would this happen? And the reason why is if you can complete those ballots and insert them fraudulently, then you could dictate the results of an election. And we have demonstrated in our litigation that there were hundreds, tens of thousands, and in some instances hundreds of thousands of ballots that were not requested, but suddenly were grabbed and voted for others who did not vote. So there you have a pool of ballots you can use. We explained in the news conference how you can easily create persons that don't really exist by using their maiden name or birth names in an area they once lived, cast a vote for them, and you're likely not to be caught. And we have an affidavit that I referred to where they did just that with a woman. And they registered her under her birth name back in her home state that she hasn't lived in over 30 years, and she's never registered under her birth name. So access to the poll books, those types of things, this isn't that difficult to do.
And during this event, the Attorney General Barr did come out and make a statement to the Associated Press saying that he did not see evidence of fraud that would sway the election. Your response to that?
Well, I think that's a premature statement, and I think it's the wrong question. The real question is, do we have evidence of fraud? And the answer is yes. Then the next question is, does it deserve investigation? And the answer is clearly yes.
So, but in terms of AG Barr and getting the information to be subpoenaed or sequestered or to continue any sort of investigation, is this new information from this press conference, do you anticipate that AG Barr might move on this?
Well, I would hope so, but I don't have an anticipation. We just found our responsibility to make this public and let the American people become aware of it, and we intend to pursue the investigation. And I think there's also another question, and the Attorney General probably wasn't asked that, and that is there evidence that would indicate the Supreme Court should invalidate election results? And I believe there is. That's a different question than whether it would change the outcome. The question is this: did we have an integral election where we are confident that the result reflected the will of the people? The answer to that question is no. So what should we do about it?
And I want to turn to Wisconsin, where you had your testimony of the postal worker, the contractor of the Postal Service, who was on stage here, and you said that he's given his testimony over to authorities, and he said that he had 100,000 ballots that he heard from 2 different postal workers that were backdated to meet the deadline. These postal or these ballots apparently, according to his statement, came in very early in the morning. Is there evidence to say, well, they had arrived and they just needed to be counted at that point because they had arrived and it was early in the morning, and arguably they arrived at the facility before midnight? Well,
there's a lot of evidence that indicates that's not the case. And the reason of that is twofold. First of all, the very statements of the people who spoke with him. First, they claimed that he had forgotten ballots when he had not. That was a ruse to be able to say that they suddenly found ballots that were not there and inject them into the process. Secondly, he was told by 2 separate people that the ballots were rounded up on November 4th, which is the day after the election. And the law is clear, they have to be at the counting facility by 8 p.m. on November 3rd. So backdating the ballots is a federal crime. And why would you backdate something and commit a crime if you didn't feel it was necessary? So there's a lot of evidence indicating that this was likely a fraudulent infusion of ballots.
So, and how would you go about proving that, though, that these were backdated? Is there a way for you to prove that they were backdated?
Well, there's a lot of ways. Postal facilities have cameras. There are personnel in postal facilities that need to be asked questions. These type of investigations take time. And when you're looking at a criminal investigation, it takes a longer period of time. That really, this election season, post-election, doesn't allow sufficient time to fully develop that evidence. So again, it's evidence of the wrong question. If you want to convict somebody, I have to prove with the confidence of a unanimous jury that they believe they committed the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not the standard with elections. The standard with elections is really, do the people who have the responsibility of running it and do the people who have the responsibility of reviewing it believe the election was conducted properly? That's the standard. And the answer is no. In fact, there's overwhelming evidence that there were intentional violations of the law by election officials. They admit as much in kicking people out of the counting room and so forth. So those who are considering this should not consider, do we have evidence to convict somebody of fraud? That's the wrong question. Do we have confidence in the way the election was run? And the answer is no.
Okay, a lot of balls in the air, a lot of stuff happening, and maybe it looks bleak, but guess what? Miracles have a habit of following this president around. It may take a miracle. Look, I still have confidence. Maybe I'm hopeful, but stranger things have happened, huh? Or maybe they haven't, but I think we're due. I'm just really happy to start hearing from some people, you know, after all those cries of no evidence, they're stepping forward and they're telling their story. Cumbersome sometimes, and they don't fit into neat little boxes. The media, by the way, they're not terribly good at telling complex stories, and they're not interested in telling this one. So it's a bit of a challenge to report on all this stuff. You'll remember, though, when they had witnesses coming forward against Donald Trump. Remember, during impeachment, during the Russia hoax, they were celebrated. They're still dining out on what they did before Congress. Remember, wall-to-wall hearings, right, on all the networks? Here's a portion.
The American people have heard the testimony of truly patriotic career public servants.
I have no interest in advancing the outcome of your inquiry in any particular direction except toward the truth.
They were glorified, celebrated, put on the covers of magazines. Why do you think they did that? You know what had little something to do with it? Not only were they anti-Trump, but class. These are folks from elite universities, and they talk in a certain way, and they operate at the highest levels of government, and they are embraced, or were embraced, by the mainstream media. The folks you heard from today, no, they're nothing to see here. They're just ordinary people. Ordinary people usually have the most amazing stories to tell. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not. But I do know that our government has let us down many, many times, and they're letting us down right now. Was Richard Jewell conspiracy theory what happened to him? It was a conspiracy theory what they had against him. Richard Jewell. They said he bombed the Olympics in Atlanta in 1996. The FBI ruined this guy's life for a time. Look at the media. They were along for the ride, hurting this man. Ultimately, totally exonerated, had absolutely nothing to do with it, except that he helped people that night, that he helped save lives. How about Steve Hatfill? Remember that name? Remember the anthrax mailer, the anthrax attacks after 9/11? The FBI thought it was this guy, and so did the media. They hounded him night and day for a long time. He fought hard for his innocence.
Today, I again appear before the TV cameras. I want to look my fellow Americans directly in the eye and declare to them, I am not the anthrax killer. I know nothing about the anthrax attacks. I had absolutely nothing to do with this terrible crime. My life is being destroyed by arrogant government bureaucrats who are peddling groundless innuendo and half information about me to gullible reporters who in turn repeat this to the press under the guise of news.
Arrogant government bureaucrats, did you hear that? And gullible reporters. Sounds pretty familiar. Sounds very, very familiar. Ultimately, they had to apologize to Steve Hatfill and give him several $1 million for his troubles. Now, some of the failures of our government were far more systemic. September 11th, 2001. You know, there are warnings up and down the intelligence system throughout government that there was a problem. But everybody kind of just went to work, did their paperwork, and went home. and then nearly 3,000 people were killed. This was a failure. People failed.
Your government failed you. Those entrusted with protecting you failed you. And I failed you. We tried hard, but that doesn't matter because we failed.
Government can mess up in the most catastrophic and tragic ways. Do you remember where you were when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded? I was taking a midterm in high school, and they came in and told us that the 7 astronauts were lost, including Kristen McAuliffe, the first teacher to fly in space. Just a minute into the flight, and it exploded. What a horrible moment. But did you know that there were dozens of people, both in private industry and in government, who knew that there was a very good chance that the orbiter would explode for the reason it exploded? The O-rings. They were on the edge of their seat. They knew it could happen. I mean, not just a dangerous spaceflight and something could go wrong, but that this specific malfunction would happen. And it did. There's actually a very impressive docu-series about this right now on Netflix. Take a look at this.
NASA was always the good guys, the bright stuff. You realize they're really rolling the dice.
My dad, he said, I don't care who you tell, the shuttle is going to explode.
3, 2, 1.
How could they let this happen?
How could they let this happen? And how are they letting this happen right now? I don't want to see this in some docu-series 5 years from now about how this election was stolen. It's being stolen right now. We've got to do everything we can to stop it. We've got to do everything we can to stop it. The media, most of them, they're of no help because they've already decided, and on that Saturday after Election Day, they brought out all their bells, whistles. They had all kinds of meetings on how they would make the announcement. And they did it in a big way, and they're not going to take it back. No way.
And this is a CBS News special report. I'm Nora O'Donnell at CBS News, and we are coming on the air with breaking news at this hour. CBS News projects that Joe Biden has been elected the 46th president of the United States. The kid from Scranton becomes the next leader of the free world.
Did you catch that she works at CBS News? I knew, I saw it on Channel 2. I know that's CBS. She said it, I think, 6 times. They're not going to take this back. She wore the special outfit. They brought in 2 hairdressers, and that's it. They're too far in. They can't take this back. So what we're hearing right now, they're going to ignore it. They're going to ignore it, and when they have to, they're going to minimize it. They're going to downplay it. And they're going to ridicule those who believe it and ridicule those who are coming forward with their stories because they have chosen their winner. They believe it's Joe Biden. And in many ways, Joe Biden is the perfect person for this moment that they've created. There's Joe enjoying his newfound temporary status. I don't think he's going to be president. I really don't think it's going to happen. I don't know. I feel like it's going to turn. Sorry, Joe, but we'll see. But he is the guy for this moment because early in his career, he told everybody, literally everybody, use me for your purposes. I am corruptible. You don't believe me? He said it out loud like a year after he got to the Senate. I'm not kidding.
You run the risk of deciding whether or not you're going to prostitute yourself to give the answer you know they want to hear in order to get funded to run for that office. See, I went to the big guys for the money. I was ready to prostitute myself in the manner in which I talk about it. But what happened was they said, come back when you're 40, son.
Prostitute himself. He was ready to prostitute himself, and he's prostituting himself. And he's kind of happy about it. Here's the thing. Joe is... he's not a smooth talker, but he thinks he is. And he's one of those guys who thinks he's funnier than he is. And something else. All right, look, am I being harsh? Maybe a little bit, but their side is being really, really harsh. Couldn't believe I saw this moment on CNN and absolutely no pushback. Some woman who's never met the Trumps, but thinks she's an expert about what's happening inside the Trump family. Nobody should say this about anybody's family, but it happened in broad daylight on CNN.
Why is it that no one has been able to successfully intervene in the president's delusions?
Well, you talk about family, and I think it's because the people surrounding him don't love him. They fear him.
Really?
They fear him, and so they cower in his presence. If you love someone, you would direct them to a better path, right? Your wife would take the phone away and say, Brian, this isn't good for you. This will not end well. No one does that because they live in fear of him.
Yes, the guy's reaction was, really? Oh, wow, that's, Mom, what a shame. They don't love him? Of course they love him. They're fiercely devoted to their father. I've seen this. There's real love in that family, and just a horrific thing to say. But it's okay when their side says it against Donald Trump. You can say anything against him and get away with it these days. Somebody said something about Donald Trump and his political prospects right now that I disagree with, but I think they came from a good place. I'm talking about Geraldo Rivera, who I actually know and I like. I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, but I do believe he's giving the president some very, very bad advice right now.
I think that the president is on the wrong course here. I think he's got to take a real gut check between now and Saturday, with all due respect. And you know I love the guy, but enough is enough now.
What is this enough is enough? I mean, in America, everybody, binge watches TV and like, okay, we need a new episode and let's go already, let's go. Nothing's happened in 3 days or 3 weeks. No, it doesn't work that way. The president is doing his job. He is protecting the Constitution. He has a duty. Sir, you have a duty right now to pursue what's right and making sure that every legal vote is counted. Fair enough? Fair enough. Good luck, Mr. President.